It begins with a mother named Rose desperately searching the area for her sleepwalking daughter. Sharon's stuck in a trance looking down at a waterfall but sees herself looking up from what appears to be hell. Just before she steps off, Rose manages to rescue her daughter, who's still unresponsive and screaming the name Silent Hill. Sometime later, Rose decides to take her daughter to the town of Silent Hill in hopes that it will give them answers. They pass a sign on the way saying that angels shall be judged by people and not the other way around. Rose's husband Chris is kept in the dark about the road trip but comes across the websites Sharon pulled up on the haunted town. It suffered a terrible underground fire 30 years ago that killed most of the population, but Rose already knows and just wants to see what she can find. She pulls into a gas station and discovers that all of Sharon's pictures now show the town burning, which distresses Sharon, who can't remember doing it and gets the attention of a nearby police officer. While inside, Rose gets a call from Chris insisting that they continue with traditional remedies, but the desperate mother feels out of options and asks him just to trust her. As the girls continue their journey, they're soon pulled over by the officer, but Rose notices that they're at the Silent Hill turnoff and decides to evade the police. The officer gives chase as Rose crashes through a fence and crosses the bridge onto the hill, but as they come up on the town, she sees someone step out in front and swerves into an embankment to avoid hitting her. When Rose regains consciousness, she notices that Sharon's disappeared and it's now the middle of the day. Ash fills the air, and with no sign of the officer or her daughter, she enters Silent Hill alone to wander the abandoned streets. She sees what looks like her running away, but the girl leads her down a stairway below street level, when a siren wails in the distance and the whole place becomes impossibly dark. Now with only her lighter to see, Rose ignores the scenery change and continues following the girl deep underground. She comes across a gutted miner strung up who seems to be signaling with his eyes as a burning humanoid approaches from behind. It gives off a loud screech, and with dozens more that seem to come out of nowhere, they all begin grabbing at Rose. She barely manages to escape the room and tries to crawl away from the swarm, when suddenly they all just dissolve before they reach her and Rose passes out from the stress. She wakes up in an abandoned bowling alley with the sun up and Ring of Fire playing on the jukebox. After continuing through the town, Rose is stopped at a large chasm separating Silent Hill from the rest of the world. Just then, crazy local Dahlia appears and says that it's the Dark One who opens and closes the doors and also takes all their children. When Rose shows her a picture of Sharon in hopes of locating her, Dahlia claims that it's her child and has a brief moment of aggression, causing Rose to run away. She returns to the car and realizes that all of Sharon's pictures are of places around Silent Hill, but when trying to call Chris, all he hears on the other end is static. Rose is suddenly interrupted by the police officer Sybil, who's just woken up after crashing her bike in pursuit. Meanwhile, Chris goes to Silent Hill in search of his family, but the bridge is blocked by the police. Thomas is the detective in charge and has also got an officer missing, so he takes Chris to go look around. Sybil's walking back towards them with Rose in handcuffs, but they're prevented from leaving Silent Hill by another chasm. A humanoid monster comes down from the hill and ignores the officer's threats, until it's close enough to spit a black acid that melts through Sybil's jacket and helmet. The angry officer is distracted, killing the spitter and allowing Rose to run back into town in search of the local school. Inside, she finds a set of keys and a flashlight in the main office before Rose begins searching the building for Sharon. She hears someone approaching, but it's three imposing miners that cause her to run to the other end of the building. Meanwhile, Chris and Thomas enter Silent Hill but find no obstructions or falling ash. Local boy Thomas points out his father's old store and says that half the bodies were never found after the fires. In a classroom, Rose comes across a journal owned by a student named Alessa, who was bullied for being the daughter of a witch and looks just like Sharon. One of the two girls leads Rose upstairs and into a bathroom where she finds a dead janitor contorted into a wild position. Inside his mouth, Rose finds a piece of a hotel room key, when the miners begin approaching, so she locks the bathroom door. Before they can break it down, their canary alerts the miners to run away, as a few seconds later the siren goes off, alerting Rose to the same thing. The world changes around her, and with her being conscious this time, she watches as she's transported to a hellish version of Silent Hill. The janitor reanimates and begins coming towards Rose, spreading an infection across the walls and summoning a swarm of insects. Rose runs away terrified but comes across a hallway filled with giant bugs that are eating the trio of miners. She runs even faster and gets distracted by what we now know as Alessa, causing Rose to fall through a window into the courtyard. As she rises, a giant man named Pyramid Head exits with a swarm of roaches, so Rose takes off running. On the other side, Chris is searching the same location but in broad daylight with everything seemingly normal. He can smell his wife's perfume whenever they pass, but Thomas just thinks he's beginning to hallucinate. Chris knows there's something the locals aren't telling him, but he's told to return home and leave it to Thomas. Instead, Chris breaks into the town archives to look up information on Silent Hill. He discovers a report on Alessa and is shocked to learn that she perished in the fires and looks exactly like his daughter. Rose pretty much gives up when she's rescued from the insect swarm by Sybil just before they reach her. Sealed inside a storeroom, the officer uncuffs Rose and locks them inside with a steel pipe, when suddenly Pyramid Head's sword pierces through the doors, allowing the bugs to get inside. Before he can gain access himself, everything begins reverting back to normal and the bugs dissolve away. Sybil's down to her last magazine, and while Rose tells her about the hotel, they make their way across town. They reach the inside and find Dahlia being attacked by a local zealot named Anna. She tells them that the witch has been dispelled from her religious group residing at Silent Hills Church, and plasters symbols of their elders' faith all across town. Inside room 111's mailbox, Sybil finds a drawing that looks like Sharon's, so Rose decides that's where they'll start looking for her daughter. They take Anna along for information but find a painting of a burning witch hiding the entrance to room 111. Realizing the town was founded by witch hunters, they cut their way inside and discover that the room leads into the building next door. Rose spots Alessa again and chases her away from the others and into a secret theater with a large hole in the middle. She climbs over the mineshaft which descends into the hellish pit and finds her daughter's doppelganger crying on the other side. Alessa suddenly bursts into flames as Sybil and Anna reach them, but the young girl's already disappeared. Just then Anna takes off screaming that the darkness is coming and heads towards the town church. When the siren begins wailing and dozens of locals begin coming out of everywhere to take shelter, Dahlia tries to warn the outsiders that the people are deceivers, but Anna throws rocks at her and denies the lies. The ground begins transforming, so Sybil and Rose run to the church doors, but Anna tries to throw another rock at the poor woman, giving Pyramid Head enough time to cross over behind her. In one swift pull, the beastly man rips Anna's flesh from her body, splatting Rose and Sybil with her blood. The townspeople attack the newcomers for being witches until Sybil uses her last bullet to warn them away. Their leader Christabella calms her flock and has them all gather around the cult symbol to pray for sanctuary from the darkness. Afterwards, she agrees to take Rose to the home of the demon that has her daughter, and travels with a group of miners for protection across town. They reach the hospital where Christabella tells Rose to memorize the building's layout and indicates that the demon's in the very bowels of the building. A miner gives her a flashlight, but when Christabella sees Sharon looks like Alessa, she calls Rose a witch and they all attack her. Sybil protects her while Rose escapes in an elevator and remains up top to hold off the cult, but with no bullets remaining, she's easily overpowered and beaten by the miners. Meanwhile, Chris goes to the orphanage trying to get information from a nun about his daughter. She refuses to tell any secrets until Thomas shows up and arrests Chris for breaking in. He sits him down and says that 30 years ago cultists killed Alessa, leaving the horrible burns on his palms, and warns Chris to stay away from Silent Hill so that he can deal with it himself. Rose descends for what seems like forever and finds herself on the correct floor. Her way to the demon's room's blocked by a bunch of twitchy blind nurses, all holding razor-sharp scalpels. They all react negatively to the torch, requiring Rose to turn it off and try to navigate through them in darkness. One takes a swing at her, slicing the throat of another, and they all begin attacking their neighbors blindly. Rose manages to crawl beneath them and leaves the flashlight as a distraction while she runs into the demon's room. We hear Alessa's voice begin explaining the truth about what happened 30 years ago. The then principal of the school, Christabella, took Delilah's daughter and roasted her over a fire pit in the hotel room simply for being born out of wedlock. This was the cause of the fire that left Alessa to be found by Officer Thomas somehow still alive. We see Rose standing by the bed of the now 40-year-old Alessa, whose hatred manifested in the younger version of herself that placed the curse on Silent Hill. All of the goodness remaining did the same and manifested inside the other version, which is now called Sharon. Alessa now seeks revenge on her abusers and enters Rose's body to gain access to the church that the cultists hide inside. A group dressed as miners at the behest of Christabella have found Sharon being protected by Dahlia. They take the two to the church where they've fashioned another fire pit and are about to roast Sybil for being a witch. The officer tries to shout some sense into the fanatics, but they blindly follow their leader and lower Sybil down onto the fire. She tells Sharon to be strong, then catches on fire and is burned alive in front of the cheering crowd. Just as the cult gets set to sacrifice Sharon next, the doors swing open and Rose enters to a stunned room. She warns the townspeople that what they're doing isn't keeping the demons away like Christabella says, but is the very reason the darkness keeps returning for them. To keep her silent, the mad leader stabs Rose with what would be a kill shot, but it instead allows Alessa to gain access to the sacred ground and the room grows dark. The blood spreads, causing the scenery to change into its hellish counterpart, and the wound heals. Old Alessa uses barbed wire to carry her hospital bed out of the pit and picks up her accuser. Once the evil manifestations climbed up, Alessa rips Christabella apart from the inside while she dances around in her blood below. The entire town falls victim to Alessa's revenge while she avoids harming her mother Delilah. Rose kills who she must and is protected by Alessa's attacks until she's able to make it to Sharon. The two hide in a corner where Rose tells her daughter to just close her eyes until it's over, but she opens them and passes out at the sight of her evil counterpart. When the sun's up, the girls leave the church together, but Sharon gives a look to Delilah implying that she's now possessed by her daughter Alessa. They return to the car on the outskirts of Silent Hill and drive past Sybil's bike while leaving, then drive straight over the chasm as if it was always just an illusion. Rose calls home and leaves Chris a message like before, but he still only hears static on his end. When they arrive home, Rose doesn't notice that everything's still enshrouded by a fog and Chris isn't home. They exist now permanently in the Silent Hill plane of existence while Chris can sense them there but has no way to get them out. And the movie ends.